welcome back to the Confidence Show podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest, Abbie West. Abbie is an Instagram marketer who helps women-led creative businesses level up their Instagram through organic content. Photography is Abbie's second love, and when she's not at her desk, you'll find her out snapping pictures of pretty places in and out of London, in and out of England. And do you know what? I rehearsed this so many times, and I kept saying London in the rehearsal, and I'm like, no, England. So welcome, Abbie. Yeah.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited. And we were just discussing before you got in, like, this is the first podcast interview that you've ever done.
I know. Yeah.
Privileged to have you here.
I wouldn't want to have it on any other podcast, so
Actually make me blush. So we've obviously spoken. We were just saying before we started recording, we've been speaking for 3 or 4 years now, which is a really long time. I just thought before I'd hopped on to record, I was like, oh yeah, I'm chatting to Abbie, this is gonna be great. And then I was like, oh, this is the first time we've actually met, because we've just spent so long speaking on Instagram, kind of voice noting backwards and forwards. And we have this shared, I don't know how to describe it. We have this shared ground, and that is anxiety. We've both suffered with anxiety for years, during our teens and then since. So how did you discover that you have anxiety, and how did you learn to cope with it through things like sixth form and university?
So I think I was in year 12, so it's the first year of sixth form that I didn't know what it was. I hadn't heard of it. Well, I obviously knew what anxiety was, but I didn't know what it was in terms of mental health. And I just started not being able to do the simplest of things. And one of those simple things was just leaving the house. I worked myself up so much to the point where I was like, I can't go, I can't leave the house right now. And sometimes what I would do is I'd actually, because mum she would obviously leave work after I would leave for school. So I would just do a loop around our little neighborhood, and then I'd go back knowing that she'd be away from home. So I just kind of dealt with it with myself. I covered it all up. And then I started to break. Slowly but surely, I started to break at sixth form in front of all my friends. And there was this one day, I remember it so well, that I was in sixth form. We had a separate block for our sixth form block. And the assistant head, I think I was going through her or past her office. And she just saw me. I think I was just so pale, I was shaking. And I just looked at her, and then I just went. I was just bawling my eyes out. And she took me into her room, and we literally just uncovered everything. And I was like, look, I have no idea what's going on with me. I don't know what the emotions are. I've never had this kind of, these emotions before. And so I think explaining that to someone was the hardest thing, because I couldn't understand it myself. And that was the most frustrating thing. But then she was so good. She was probably the best teacher. I mean, she wasn't even a teacher. She was the best kind of leader that I needed in that kind of time in my life, to help me know what to do after that. So she got me in touch with the school counsellor, who was amazing. I saw her, I think, once a week, cried every time, but it was great, because it was just my unleash of emotions that I needed to do, and just talk through with everything, to talk to her through everything. And I think even just that, I didn't necessarily think she was going to help me. I think just talking through everything that was happening at the time just helped in itself, because I didn't think I could speak to anyone, not even friends, not even my parents or my sister. I usually tell my sister everything. So I think I covered it up for so long, and then I told my sister, because one day I just broke down. Just usually happened. And I think my teachers had actually pulled my sister aside as well, and just said, look, I think you need to have a word with her. And then we had a good chat, because I tell my sister everything a lot more than what I tell my parents. So I knew that I could confide in her. And then I think around 6 months later is when I told my parents. And I think that was the hardest thing, because they also didn't understand. Mental health, when I was suffering from it, was not, it was still such a taboo subject. And so like they were just trying to understand as much as what I was, like they were kind of going through the same process that I was, you know, just a couple months earlier. And I think that was probably the most frustrating thing out of it all, is that I was like, look, this is happening to my body, I don't know why, it's not letting me do things, I don't know why. So I think that was just, and like, you know, they just kind of, they were there as, they were such a big support system. I think specifically my dad. And so it's funny how we always think if we hide things, it will just naturally go away. But actually, for me, I think speaking about it has made it so much easier. And then I told all my friends, and a lot of them understood. Obviously, some of them didn't, and I did lose friends over it 100%. But I think I'm quite glad about that, because then you know who's actually really behind you as a friend, and who's going to be there, you know, along these, like during these really hard times. So yeah, it was during sixth form, and then it definitely impacted my university life 100%. And I think when I look back on it now, I regret going to university. I think in my head I wasn't ready for it, because just purely because of where I was in, you know, like what the state I was in. And I think if I had gone maybe 2 or 3 years later, I would have had such a different experience. And then because of it, I actually ended up dropping out in the fourth year, which was really sad, because I was like, I've come so far. But there was one day that I just called my dad in absolute floods of tears, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And he was like, look, you have two decisions. I can come get you tomorrow, or you can just talk to your lecturers and see, you know, if they can help you through this. And I was like, it's the first option without doubt.
That's so nice that you had that support there. Like even in the fact that the person at your sixth form recognised that something was going on and could see something, and then you were kind of able to unburden yourself. And I'm a little bit jealous that your counselling went so well, because I used to see a counsellor at school as well, and I just didn't like her at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it hasn't all been plain sailing, I'm not gonna lie. I went to one in university, and she basically said, oh, you're fine, you'll get over it, you don't need to come see me again, after one session. And I was just like, okay. The fact that she could say that, and I was like, yeah, this is ridiculous. Yeah, and then I did another counsellor when I came back home, who was okay. But then the like life-changing bit was the hypnobirthing. The hypnobirthing.
Surprise!
Oh my gosh, not hypnobirthing. Oh my gosh. The life-changing bit that I did was hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
That was where I saw a massive change with everything. And I honestly think I put it down to that as to how I got through, you know, how I could then travel again, how I could just get onto a train. I think like public transport was a massive thing for me. I would just drive everywhere because that was my comfort zone. Like just being around people, crowds. And it's funny because I look back at COVID and I'm quite thankful for COVID in a way, because being like going places when there were hardly anyone there, and just being in my safe zone for, you know, a good year is what I needed. I think it was like a perfect time to have just a break in my life. And then that's when I started my business. So yeah.
Yeah.
It was like
That's
a
so
good
cool.
thing.
Like our stories are so similar, because I was exactly the same with public transport. Like even the thought of it, I just could not, like getting on a bus, getting on a train, like I just couldn't do it. And it's so frustrating. And as you say, like when you tell other people about it, like I always used to get like, oh, like cheer up, it's not going to be that bad, or just stop worrying about things. And I'm like, but it's not a case of like worrying about something small. Like your brain goes into this, like sometimes I worry about, like yesterday I was taking the dog to Nan's, for example, and I always put his collar on before he gets in his cage to go in the car, because I think, oh, if there's a car crash, he's got his collar on, fine, whatever. And I got him in his cage and I was like filming it to put on reels at some stage. And I didn't put his collar on, and I was like, oh, I could just leave it. And then I was like, no, because what if we go in the car? What if there's an accident? What if he doesn't have his collar on? If he's not got his collar on, what if he runs out in front of traffic? Or if there's an accident and he gets out of the car and then I can't get him? And it just spirals and spirals and spirals. It's not a case of you're worrying about silly things. It's like, I know that this is a completely ridiculous thing to be stressing out about.
Yeah.
It's not logical. You can't control it, unless you kind of learn how to manage it and how to like work through those kind of things. And I would agree with you in terms of the hypnotherapy. Like, I've done hypnotherapy for things like increasing confidence, for things like getting over a breakup, again, managing anxiety, and I find it as being so transformational. How did you
Yeah.
find that? Did you do like a one-to-one session? Did you do it online?
So I was incredibly lucky as to how the opportunity came about, because my neighbour back home, she is a hypnotherapist, and she, like, I think it is my mum that was talking to her about, you know, situation, because we're really, really friendly, so, you know, we're kind of open about everything, which is just lovely. And we didn't realize at this time that that's what she did outside of her full-time job. And she was like, you know, get her to like just send me a message and see if she wants to just do like a trial session. And then we did one. She like gave me a tape that I listened to every night, and I was like, yeah, let's do this I think we did it every Sunday for, I think, a good 6 months, 6 to 8 months. And I mean, bless her, she didn't, you know, she didn't charge. She was just like doing it as a favor, because we had such a good relationship already. And I mean, honestly, I can't thank her enough for what she did, because yeah, I don't know where I would be without seeing her, for especially for that massive period of time. And it was definitely, you know, it wasn't a quick win. It was definitely like, you know, I had to work on things, and I still had like anxiety attacks, panic attacks. um but I knew that if things happened when I was, you know, out or something, then she was like, just message me or just call me, and I'll be like there in your ear or something. So it was just nice to again have that support when, you know, I guess after university or even after school, you don't necessarily have that. I feel like even if I had my old counselor, I wouldn't have that kind of, you know, relationship with her. Is, you know, as and when you see her, that's when you have that contact. Whereas I think, obviously, she's probably not like that with all her clients, but it's just because she is my neighbor, and I think I was just lucky in that sense. And still to this day, you know, I mean, I still see her when I go back home, and she's always kind of asking, saying, how's everything going? And I'm just like, honestly, I'm a changed woman. And I just like, a lot of it is thanks to you. Which, yeah, so it was transformative for me, definitely. And I usually recommend it to people when I'm ever speaking about anxiety. If they're kind of feeling the same, I always say, you know, definitely try it. I know it's not for everyone, but just give it a try. And because I was quite against it, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, like just sitting in a room, closing my eyes, with someone listening, like talking to my ear. I'm just like, this is a bit weird.
Definitely weird, but it is
Yeah,
really so valuable.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, she helped me get on the flight, so, and that was the big thing. Like, that was a massive thing for me with my anxiety, is flying. I love traveling. Traveling is a massive part of me, and to lose that over, like, you know, something that's happening in my body or in my mind, was the most frustrating thing, because I was like, what if I can never get on a flight again? Like, I can't have this happen.
Yeah,
It's just
absolutely.
so sad. So yeah.
That's so good. And it's so good how, like you were saying before, it was really hard to talk about things, even with your sister, like someone that you're so close to. It was hard to open up and talk about these things, especially when you can't understand it. Like, as you say, this thing is happening to your body, and you're getting these feelings and you're getting these emotions, and you can't control it at all. But what's really valuable is when you did open up and you were able to express it in however you were able to. So much value came from that, because you had the support of your family, you had the support of most of your friends, and then that led you to the lady who helped with the hypnosis. So I think
Yeah.
there is so much value in talking about things. And I think when I first had anxiety as well, like, it was a taboo thing. Like, I I've had it for what, like 15 years? Oh God, like it's probably even longer, because it probably started in my early teens. So like 15, 20 years now. And it was never a thing that was talked about. And I didn't know that it was anxiety until mid-20s. So I'd suffered with it for like 10 years before I discovered what it was, and then could talk openly about it. And that's why I value these conversations so much, and I appreciate like how honest you're being about your struggle with anxiety. When you left uni, when was that? Was that just before you started your business, or did you kind of do something in between?
Yeah, so I finished, I can't even remember what year it was. I think it was 2017 or 17 or 18. And I had, my parents actually said, look, just take time out, let's try find a counselor. Just don't do anything for a solid, like at least 3 to 6 months, just so that I can, because that's what I needed. I didn't think I needed it, but I think my parents knew. They saw, they had seen the worst of me at this point, so they knew. They were just like, look, just have a time out. And then I think it was about 4 months later where I was like, okay, I'm starting to feel, like I can start to do stuff, with my life. And I started to look for a job in marketing. The skills that I had, because obviously I had no faith in kind of finding a job in, like, I wanted to do interpreting because my job, it related back to my university degree. So I wanted to do interpreting in like the MI5 or something, something cool like that. But instead, obviously, I couldn't do that. So I just kind of looked at the skills that I had. I was running a blog in during my time at university, which is actually the main reason why I got into marketing, because I was like, well, I feel like I'm quite good at writing. I had my social media, and I was like, let's just kind of see where this leads. So it was the first job that I actually applied for in marketing that I got, and it was an architectural firm, which was just down the road from me at the time. And I was there for, I think, 18 to 20 months. And then as soon as I started, I think it was within the first 2 weeks, that two of the colleagues, they had businesses outside of it, and they were like, look, because I was only part-time, so they were like, do you have a couple of hours a week spare that you can just do some work alongside, for my business? And I was like, yeah, sure, like, I'm always open to opportunities. So I did work she became a business coach, and then the other one had like a running gear website or something, business. So and then that, it kind of just went from that. It just came, like, I was never expecting this to happen. I never wanted my own business. I never really knew what a freelance was, really. And then I was like, okay, this could be a thing. And then I just kept getting referrals for clients, and then it kind of just happened. And then I think it was January or Christmas 2019, where things were happening in the company that I was in, and I was just like, okay, it's either now or never that I make this move. And like, my anxiety was still relatively bad. Like, I did actually, like, my boss was amazing. I actually opened up to him about everything, which is what I would never really do. But we had a talk actually when we went for a meeting on the way back, and he was like, look, whenever you need a day off or just come in later, just do it. Like, just send me a message just so that I know, what's happening on the day, and then just kind of, whenever you're comfortable, then just come in. And that was also just so nice to have that support. And that I looked at him like he was my dad in a way, because I was like, okay, like, this is just a lovely relationship that I have with you now. So yeah, I didn't want to leave that job, but due to some circumstances, I was like, this is kind of just the natural thing to happen now, is to go my own way. And they all supported me with it, and they actually then became a client. So it's like roles reversed.
Nice. Oh, that's so cool how it all kind of all snowballed for you and how the opportunities kind of came to you. Because I think as well with anxiety, like the thought of having to push yourself out there and like force yourself into those conversations can be really hard to do. Whereas the fact that you've got so many referrals, like that's how my business grew as well. And it's so nice. And I think people often overlook that as like the marketing strategy almost,
Yeah,
like those
yeah,
referrals. But there's so much value in it because then you've also got people that are coming to you knowing and trusting you already because
yeah,
you've helped other people, which is brilliant.
yeah.
Um, it can be really stressful running a business at times, as I'm sure you know, because you've been running it for a couple of years now. And for me, like stress typically makes my anxiety worse. How do you manage the anxiety alongside managing your business?
So I think the times that I'm more stressed is when I'm out of a routine, which is funny because usually, obviously, like at school, I had a routine. At university, I had a routine, and it just didn't work for me. But I think because obviously having your own business, you create your own routine. It makes it so much easier. So, like for example, I think this week I've been quite out of routine already. But as soon as I wake up, if I go for a morning walk, that is like the thing that sets me up for the day. Without that morning walk, I can be all over the place for the day. Um, and I think it's to let all the emotions out, like all my thoughts come out in the morning, and I just either put in like a podcast, or I sometimes still do listen to hypnosis, just on like Spotify or something. And it's just like my kind of, okay, let all the energy out and just kind of, and then I can get back to my desk knowing that I'll be like focused. Whereas if I don't go for that morning walk, or I don't do something in the morning, I am just a bit all over the place, I feel, and my head just can't focus on one thing, and it's just a bit of a mess is how I would describe it. But yeah, definitely that like helps me so much. And I think also just having not necessarily a strict routine. And I think this is what is good about having my business is obviously I work with people that I absolutely love to work with. And what I do is my zone of joy. So that makes such a huge difference. And I'm not going to say that that's what it's like 24/7, because absolutely not. Like I wish, but that's not, whoever says that in business is lying. But yeah, it's just, I think that was the main thing for me, is just having that kind of one thing that kind of takes me away from my business in the day. And I know I've actually just recently started journaling as well, because a lot of my clients and just people that I know do journaling. And I've always had it in the back of my mind. And I'm just like, maybe that's a good release of my emotions. And I only started it, I've only done it for like 3 days, so it's too soon to tell. But I'm hoping that that will kind of, shift my mindset with some things, and just to help, with the stress. I think my stress comes massively when it comes down to money, um, which is such a silly thing. Like I know it's something that I need to work on, but I hate spending money. I hate it so much. And so unless it's on travel, I'll happily say goodbye to money when it's on travel. But like it's just that anxiety that, like, will I earn it back, or like, is that the wrong investment? And I just question so much around it. Um, and a lot of the things actually that I spend my money on, for some reason, I always go to my dad for, because I'm just like, do you think this is okay? Do you think this is stupid? Like, I don't want to make the wrong decision. And he's always been like, really good with his finances, and he works in finance. So I'm just like, okay, I'm glad that I have him there just as like a little, you know, kind of advice giver.
Oh, that's so nice that you've got that support there again. When it comes to like spending money, like do you spend money on like investing in yourself, for example? Like you mentioned before about your coach, like how did you find investing in coaching? Because obviously that's a scary thing because there are no guarantees. It's not like when you book a trip and you're like, oh well, I'm going to go on this amazing trip and I'm going to get something out of it. Like coaching is something that can't, like, as I said, there's no guarantee. So how did you feel about doing that?
So I think beforehand, I hadn't spent any money in my business really, like any substantial amounts of money. I think maybe the most amount was maybe £400, which is not really much. And so I had this like, I've saved quite a bit and I was like, what is it that I could use this money to spend on in my business that will be so beneficial and kind of take me to that next level? And I knew that obviously I was booked out with my clients, so that was great. But I was like, my own marketing and my own kind of business plan was a mess. Like my business model was just a mess. There was no business model really. So I was like, okay, I think a business coach is probably the way forward right now. And honestly, it transformed my business. And I think I had listened to a load of podcasts around investing and why it is so important to invest in yourself and your business. And I was like, this is stupid. It's been 2 years now. It's time. I think, it was like a huge amount of money, but I knew I could make it back just from doing what I was doing before investing anyway. But I think knowing that I would just have clarity, and it was the confidence thing as well. I knew that working with a coach, I mean, this isn't always guaranteed, but I would gain some confidence in just how to sell myself, how to represent myself. Um, and that, yeah, and I got a massive return on investment. And actually I've just started working with her again. So clearly she was worth it.
That's so good. And I think what's really good and something that I kind of want to touch on is the fact that you had achieved success in your business already. Like you knew what you were doing because you were fully booked with clients, you'd grown your business over 2 years, and you were almost looking for someone to help you move to the next level rather than relying on the person that's going to give you the magic pill to solve all your problems. And I think sometimes this is something that some of us, and I've done this myself as well, so this is not a judgmental thing, but some of us go into these investments with coaches expecting them to fix everything and expecting them to change everything and solve the problem if we're not making money, if we're not signing clients. And yes, that can happen to a certain extent, but I think it's also important to have some kind of solid foundations in place before you start throwing money at someone who might not get you the return that you want.
Yeah. And I think that relates back to every business industry in some way. Like I've had clients come to me, I just do their social media, but they come to me with all their shit and I'm just like, I can't, as much as I'd love to help you with this, I can't. And that thing is actually quite stressful sometimes because you're just like, you'd love to help them, but I just don't have the skills and qualifications sometimes to be able to give that kind of advice.
Yeah.
And it's quite frustrating. But yeah, I mean, business coach was a scary investment, but I knew it was kind of time. I think I'd been in contact with this coach for 2 years. I think ever since I started my business. So it was, it's kind of like with you, like we had that initial communication for ages, and then she put this off, and I was like, okay, yeah, like I've gained that trust with you, like I've built that kind of initial relationship. So it made that step, it's made that taking that step so much easier than what it would have been with like, someone that I probably hadn't heard of.
Yeah, I think it's, again, like that's good because you'd already got that relationship. I think it's very easy, and again, I'm speaking from my own experience, like it's very easy to see someone marketing themselves really well on Instagram, for example, who you don't have a relationship with. And then you're like, oh, quick, I need to jump into this because I need to fix something that's wrong with me. And then you invest in it and you realize, actually, this is not perhaps the right person for me. This wasn't perhaps the right course for me. So I think there is a lot of value in taking time to make those decisions and making them from that place of, I just want to improve. And as you say, the same, like when you work with social media clients, like I've worked with social media clients before who have wanted to drive traffic to a new platform or wanted to drive traffic to their website. Yet when I've checked out their website, I'm doing all the driving the traffic, that's great. But then you go and you look at the foundations, like the website's not set up right, the process is clunky, like it's not user friendly, or things are like spelt wrong or don't make sense. And it's just like you have to have those kind of foundations before you think, oh, I'm going to invest in something else, just like something else to support me, or I'm going to invest in social media management, but actually the background of your business isn't fully
Yeah.
as it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so one of the reasons that I really wanted my own business was to, well, one, be able to travel, but also to have the space to kind of manage my anxiety when it got really bad. So some days it would be like so bad that I couldn't get out of bed, or my IBS would kick off. So I would have to call in sick at work, which then led to me nearly getting fired, which is fun. Whereas, whereas I know. Whereas now that I'm the boss, like I can obviously take time to rest and recuperate. Like if I'm not feeling well, I can be like, do you know what? I'm just going to clear everything in my diary and I'm just going to rest. Would you say that having your own business has had that kind of positive effect on your management of anxiety as well?
Yes, it has now. I must admit though, the first year I worked myself stupidly hard, to the point where I did eventually reach burnout, and it was going to happen. It was inevitable, really. Um, and obviously, that stage of my business, I was so anxious because I had clients messaging me like asking for these things. I was making mistakes like never before, and in a way it was I'm quite glad I did go through that, because it was a wake-up call. I was like, look, okay, stop, look at how your business is running, look at the hours you're working, which was just ridiculous for, you know, what I was earning. And then I was just like, okay, something needs to change. Boundaries is the biggest thing that has made my life so much easier with my clients. And obviously it's so hard when you're already working with clients to say, okay, now these are my hours. And I didn't have the confidence back then to say, look, things are changing. I'm gonna have to, you know, say no to half the stuff you're asking me. Instead, what I did is I changed my messaging, and this was actually when I started working with my coach, or just slightly before. I started changing the way that I was marketing myself, and also just my messaging. And as soon as I did that, I was then attracting different kind of clients, higher ticket clients, who instantly, I didn't even have to explain it to them. They instantly knew that I wasn't going to be there 24/7 to help them. And I think that was such a big thing. Like my clients to start with, it's not that it was their fault. It's not that they were, you know, asked too much. It was my fault for not setting those boundaries in place. And I always say now it's so important to have that, because that is the reason why I'm so much happier in my business now. I have so much more flexibility. My clients know when I'm available. They know when to expect, you know, when to hear from me. But I also, and I sometimes do say, like, if I'm awake and I'm on WhatsApp for like at 11 p.m., I'll respond. But I never expect a response for them, you know. But it's just as and when. And then we just both have that, I can't think of the word. I have to edit this out, sorry.
No, it'll be fine.
um uh
Almost like a mutual understanding kind of thing.
Mutual understanding, that was literally what I was thinking of. Yeah, you have that mutual understanding. So as soon as you start working together, it's just plain sailing. And that's exactly what it's been with every client that I've had since the start of 2022. And that is the reason why I mean, I don't feel like I get too anxious now around my business. There may be some calls that I'm like maybe less prepared with, or I don't know how they're going to go. I just get nervous for, I don't, just because I think it's a confidence thing. It's not that I know I'm scared of the client or how the conversations go. It's probably it's just a confidence thing in me. I'm just like, right, pull yourself together, you're fine. And then after every call, I'm just like, what were you worried about? You know, it's kind of that sense of relief. I'm just like, look, just go into that mindset of everything is going to be fine. They're your client, they're paying you, and they give you, like, you know, when they give you such good feedback as well, you're like, clearly I'm doing such a good job that otherwise they would have left me. So
Absolutely. Oh, sorry. I think you really have to trust that feedback as well, don't you? Because I've had exactly the same with clients, and especially in my first year of business, I'd get so many people like telling me how good I was and like renewing their contracts, and my anxious brain would just be like, they're going to fire me any minute. Like I'm not doing a good enough job,
yeah,
even though the proof is there. Like I'd get the messages, the
yeah,
on calls.
exactly.
Trust that if somebody's
Yeah,
giving you feedback, they're giving it to you for a reason.
yeah. And it's all down to mindset. Every single thing in life comes down to mindset.
Mm.
And again, this is kind of going back to the hypnotherapy. That's kind of what's I like. Hypnotherapy is about retraining your brain, and that is a massive thing. Like that is majority as to why my mindset is now so positive rather than before it was so negative, because I was like, well, I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that. So whereas now I'm just like, just trust the process, it's gonna, it's gonna go well. and and it's also just reminding yourself of the journey. I always go back and I'm just like, where I was even just a year ago compared to now, I'm just like it, like I'm bloody proud of myself. And I think you just have like you have to constantly remind yourself of what you've been through, even if you're feeling like you're going through a tough time right now, you know, even a year ago, where were you? Like just see, how have you shifted from a year ago to now? And like even though I was in such a good place a year ago, I'm in an even better place now because I'm also not living with my parents. I've moved out. But like yeah, it's just it's always a mindset thing, and I think that's also why I kind of want to get into journaling, because I think that will improve my mindset. And again, that's kind of like a looking back on feedback, but from yourself, not from your clients. It's who you were even just last week compared to now. Like look at back at your feelings, and your attitude and things. So it's yeah, I think it comes down to that really for me. Yeah, it's such a big thing.
Yeah, for sure. I love that you just celebrated yourself as well, because I think we don't do that enough. No, honestly, I think we just don't. We'll celebrate everyone else, we'll cheer our friends on, we'll cheer our clients on, and then when it comes to ourselves, we wait until it's like the biggest thing before we'll
Yeah,
sit there and go, oh yeah, well done. But then we'll go straight on to the next things. Whereas we should be celebrating these little things and the changes in us personally. As you say, like I don't recognize the person I was a year ago, because I've changed so much in that year for the better. And it's not until kind of like different scenarios or experiences come up that mean you have to face something difficult that you really understand how far along you've kind of come. One of the things that I also wanted to touch on was your mentioning of the boundaries, because I think boundaries are so important. And I think setting the boundaries, but then sticking to the boundaries is also really important, because that's kind of the trap that I've fallen into before, where
yeah,
I've been like, right, these are my boundaries, this is what I'm going to do. And then a client's messaged me at 11 o'clock and my anxious brain has been like, oh my God, if I don't respond to them, then they might fire me. So how do you, one, what are kind of some of the boundaries that you set in your business? And two, how do you ensure that you stick to them?
so one of the big boundaries is I don't work on weekends. Like weekends is my time away from my business and from my clients. um and then what was the second part, sorry?
I can't remember. Oh no, how do you how do you stick to the boundaries when you
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so that's probably like the main boundary. And then I do my hours are like 10 till 4. But the second question, sticking to boundaries, that is my downfall. I wouldn't say like I'm awful at sticking to them, but with some things, like it's only with a couple clients I tend to find. And again, it's the clients that have been with me for longer than when I kind of had this shift in my business. So sometimes I just send, like if they send them a message at weekend, I'm just like, yeah, that's fine, I'll reply on Monday. Have a good weekend. So I will always reply. I'll just make sure that I just address the fact that I won't respond to this until my working hours start on Monday. So I think I do stick to them, but I think, yeah, there are maybe one or two clients that I do add that bit of extra flexibility, just because, like, you know, it's kind of how we were from the start. And also I build such personal relationships with my clients. So with some of them, I know that, like, if they message me on the weekend, they know not to expect a reply from me until Monday. But they also know that she probably will reply. Because if I'm free, if I'm available, even just 5 minutes, because if it's just a WhatsApp message or a Voxer message, then I'm just like, you know, if it's a quick one and I'm here, that's just naturally me. I'm the same with anything, with emails, with messages. Like, I don't know why, but as soon as I can see it come through, I'm just like, I have to respond to that. Because if I read it, I will forget it. And I obviously don't want that to happen, because that could easily ruin my reputation. So I think it's also that fear. Like, if I don't respond by a certain time, I'm like, is this going to have a negative impact on me and my business? So that's always in the back of your mind, or on the back of my mind. But yeah, majority of my oh my gosh, majority of my clients, majority of my clients, they, yeah, they kind of, they have those boundaries as well. So they always would probably expect that with people that they hire or that they work with. So I think that's also a big thing, is if you have those boundaries yourself, you would expect that for anyone you're working with. Whereas I know previous clients didn't have that, so they, you know, they didn't really understand what boundaries were. They didn't know they existed. So that's definitely such a difference between those two types of clients.
Yeah, for sure. I like the fact that you kind of reinforce them, even just like if somebody messages you at the weekend and you say, I will reply on Monday, because that's not you overstepping your boundaries, but it's almost like reminding people that these are in place. Like, just know that I will get to it then, which I think is very important. And one thing that we haven't talked about yet is how our anxiety kind of shows up for you. So do you have any like specific symptoms that you get, or like what does anxiety look like for you?
Um, Without going into too much detail, it's because I don't know, you know, I don't want to put people off, but uh, I think it is more a feeling. So it's like something around my stomach is, and it's kind of actually when you mentioned IBS, it's kind of that symptom really for me, which is a big one. So whenever, I mean, I'm not like this now, but when I did really suffer badly, whenever I was going out to anything, I would have to plan my trip around bathrooms,
Mhm.
which is, it was just horrible. I literally had an app that told me where toilets were.
I need
Because
that.
it was, honestly, it saved my life. But
Mm.
I was like, it was that bad. And so that's why my safe spot was home, because, you know, I didn't have to have that worry. I didn't have to worry about where the next toilet was, or when I'd be able to, you know, because, like, especially on public transport, it's like trains were fine, buses absolutely not, tubes. Like, when I went to China, that was the worst time, because, you know, it was a brand new country. Like, I'd been there before, but obviously not with this issue that I had. So yeah, it was just the planning. It's kind of like what you were saying with the dog, you know, you're planning so far ahead, and you're basically planning the future, but you actually also have no idea what's going to happen. You know, like, if I was in a tube, my constant thought was like, what if this stops? What if this just suddenly stops? I'm going to go into full on panic mode. And that happens so much. Like, even if I was in cars, I'd be like, okay, I need to get out of this car right now.
Mm.
um and then planes, like, there was actually a massive incident, in, I don't actually have to go into I don't have to go into it, but it's basically, I was refused to get onto a flight because I was that ill. My anxiety was that bad that they refused me to get on the flight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was just like, well, this is it, I'm stuck in China forever. I was going from China to England, and the worst thing was I was with my sister, so she's, you know, she's seen the work me at my absolute worst, at my absolute lowest. um we did eventually get home, but obviously. But yeah, it was just but then I look back at it now, and it was so much of a mind game. Like, I was constantly saying in my head, this is what could go wrong, this is what could go wrong. There was nothing positive that was going on in my head. It wasn't like, even if I got through a flight, it wasn't like, you made it. I was like, well, what's next?
Yeah.
It's never looking back like, look, that what, like, nothing really bad happened then. So, you know, you can do it. It was just like, I don't know what's around the corner. It could be the same thing. It could be worse. Who, you know, you never know. And still to this day, you know, that does kind of go through my head. You know, if I'm, because I'm fine on public transport now, but even if I'm on a bus, I'm just like, okay, this is the time. I know when I'm going to get to my destination, and I know kind of what's going to be around me roughly. Um, so I still do go through that kind of process, absolutely, but it's not nowhere near as intense or negative as it used to be. You know, I made myself so ill purely from just what I was telling myself in my brain.
Yeah, it's
So
crazy
yeah,
how your brain kind of does dictate like how you feel in your body. Like I used to be the same. Like I've spent my whole life, well, not my whole life, but like a lot of my early 20s or late teens, early 20s being like, I can't do this, I can't get on public transport, I can't go out to a bar, I can't go anywhere, like I can't go here on my own. And as soon as I was like, I'm not having this anymore, and I started telling myself I can do anything I put my mind to, the shift in me and the
yeah,
shift in like those micro decisions you make on a daily basis. Like I would make myself get on a bus, or I would make myself get on a train, or I'd make myself go to Tesco's on my own. Like I'd put myself in those uncomfortable situations on purpose, and
yeah,
it was uncomfortable, but then I'd come out and I'd be like, well done. Like I'd literally celebrate those. Like when
yeah,
I first started going back out to pubs, like I'd sit in a pub for an hour, and I specifically go like 6 till 7 when it's really quiet on a Friday night before it starts getting busy. And I'd be like counting down the minutes till I could leave, but I'd make myself stay there for an hour, and then I'd get home and I'd be like, oh, I did it. Like I did it. Well, like well done. And then the
yeah,
next week I'd give myself like 90 minutes, like you're going to sit in the pub for these 90 minutes. And
yeah,
then slowly I'd like build it up. But that
yeah,
came from me changing what I was telling myself and changing kind of like constant narrative that was going on. Um,
yeah,
and for me, I also know that like alcohol, caffeine, and too much sugar are massive triggers for me,
yeah.
and for my anxiety. So, can you recognize any specific triggers that you have that kind of increase your feelings of anxiety?
So alcohol was a massive one. I think that was the main one when I was, it's not so much now. I can easily, the next day I can, you know, happily go out somewhere. Whereas before, I realized, I was like, there's definitely a pattern here. Every time I have alcohol, the next day I could not do anything. Um, and then the other thing was food. There definitely are some foods that still now trigger me. And I know exactly which foods they are, so that, you know, I just avoid them when I have plans the next day or even the same day. Um, and actually, it's funny because before, my fear was associated all around food, and it was any food. So if I would go out, I would go the whole day without eating food until I was home, to the point where, like, I got so used to it. So even now, there are some days that I can easily go the whole day without any food,
Oh my
as
God.
long as I have water. But it's because my body's been so used to that for years that it's just like, you're fine. You don't need food in there, you know. You, like, I've trained myself, you know, that I can survive off no food for a good at least 14, 16 hours. Um, but it's just because it was that fear that if I ate something, or if I didn't know what was in all of the food, that, like, if something was to trigger, you know, I'm gonna be, at some point, I'm gonna be somewhere where I don't want to be. I'm gonna be in an uncomfortable situation, basically. And so yeah, I just would never eat. And so what I would do is, if I was with my friends or even family and we went out for breakfast or lunch, I would just sit and watch them. I would never eat anything. I would never order unless I was so close to home, or if I knew we were going straight home after, then I'd be fine because I'd need that.
Yeah.
um but it was also the shift that kind of like helped me. It was, especially with my parents, you know, because I talked to them through this like all, and just like how my kind of brain was working and all my processes with everything that I was doing, that they interrupted my routine on, I think, on purpose. I like to think that they probably did it on purpose to try and help me get out of that, you know, that phase, because they realized it was so unhealthy. Everyone knew it was unhealthy. I know it's unhealthy now. I didn't at the time. I was like, oh no, it's fine, you know, I don't need food, I'm not hungry. But I got so used to it. But yeah, like they were just like, oh, let's just go to the garden center now. And I'd be like, I have no control because I'm not driving. So I was just like, okay. And then part of me was slightly uncomfortable, but the more I did it, I was like, I can do this. You know, it is possible. I just need to get out of that mindset of, you know, I need to go home right now, or that something I've eaten is going to trigger me and I'm going to have a, you know, a panic attack in the middle of a garden center or something. So yeah, I think once I kind of, and same with my friends, like um I can't remember when it was, but I went to London. I think it must have been just after COVID because my friend lives there. And we went on a bus, and it was a good, you know, 40-minute bus around London.
Mm.
4 years ago, there's no way I would have done that. Absolutely not. I'd be like, get me off every single stop. But I think again, because she knows exactly what has happened in my life, and she knows what triggers it, and she knows when I'm uncomfortable. But I think if like if I she just didn't give me the chance to think about it, and she kept speaking to me, like, you know, kind of distracting me as to what was happening. And then by the end of it, again, I was just like, I did that with no, you know, with absolute ease. There was no need to kind of think about it before. I was like, I got from A to B, and then I, you know, we went back and it was fine. So I was like, and so now I'm fine on buses. I prefer buses to the tube.
No way, I much prefer the tube. I feel like I can get off the tube quicker. Love
That's
that.
true. Yeah, I don't know why. I think because the other thing that is a massive thing for my anxiety and how it helps is fresh air. So I
Mm.
think obviously tube, you're underground, and it's also, I know that with the tube sometimes it can just stop, and it's just because, you know, and that is my worst nightmare. Whereas if a bus stops, you can easily just get out. So
Yeah.
it's probably that. Yeah, it was just, I don't know. I think it's just so much easier, and I just hate the tube anyway because of the crowds. It's just an unpleasant experience.
It's a lot better since COVID. Touch wood, it's still quite quiet on there. I went on there the other day and was like, oh, this is actually still quite nice.
Yeah.
And the new Elizabeth line's come in and I love it.
Yeah, I know. I went on it the other day and I was like, this I could get used to.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I really like, I think what you were saying as well, I think when you have the spur of the moment things, your brain doesn't have time to think about it. Whereas if you've kind of like planned to go to the garden centre like 5 days ago, you've got all that time to think about all these scenarios and what are you going to do and how are you going to manage it and what happens if, whereas if it's just spur of the moment, you just do it. And I think also reflecting on those moments once you have done them is so important. Like so many
Yeah.
times now, like even 10 years on, I'll be sat on the train or I'll be sat on a tube and I'll be thinking like, my God, I couldn't do this years ago. Like
Yeah.
no way would I have done it with anyone, let alone done it on my own. And I sit there and I'm just
Yeah.
like, so amazing, like how far you've come. So I think it's good to have those like moments of reflection as well.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I didn't like the idea of before with my business was one-to-one in-person meetings.
Mm.
Like that was the bit I was like, I probably do have to do this eventually, but how am I going to be around that? But
Mm.
actually I prefer that to Zoom meetings now.
Yeah.
Because it's people that I know I'm comfortable with, and I'm like, you know, because we have Zoom meetings every month at least, and I'm just like, I've got to know this person so much that I'm just like, I know I'll be fine. Like I've built such a good solid relationship with them that, you know, they won't make me feel uncomfortable or anything. So it's that safety. It's like yeah, it's just that safety thing.
Yeah, oh, I love that. So you've been living with anxiety for many years now. Are there any big lessons that have kind of come from you having the anxiety?
Ooh, I think I'm going to go back to the mindset thing. So I do like to think that going through all of this, I'm quite a positive person now. Um, and I'm also, I think one of the biggest things that anxiety has helped me with is just speaking about not just anxiety, about anything, just speaking about how I'm feeling, and sharing that with whoever's around, even if they're not like my closest friend. Um, it's just talking about, you know, just having an open and honest conversation is like one of the best things that I love to do. And it just kind of, again, it builds that relationship so quickly over something that, you know, they may be experiencing or they may not have realized that they've experienced before. And it's just it's quite a beautiful thing, I think. And so yeah, I think just because I actually relate this back to my mum. I hope she doesn't listen to this. But she can be sometimes quite negative, and I constantly tell her, I'm just like, look, like shift your mindset this way around, because she's also she's got anxiety 100%, and she worries so easily about like some really small things. And I'm just like, look, I know exactly where you come from, because this you were I've been through this too. And you just shift your mindset to say, I got through this day. It's even as simple as that. Even if you just got through a day where you just were so anxious, or you've just had a hard day, at the end of it you can say, okay, I got through it. That's the main thing. I think that's probably like the biggest, yeah, the biggest lesson, and one that I'm really bloody grateful for. Because honestly, I think the biggest thing as well is the person that I am now. If I saw myself before year 12 at school, even, or even at university, I would not recognize that girl. 100%, I would not know who she was. And I think a part of me is really sad, because there were really good things about her. But I'm also just like, I'm grateful for her, and I'm now grateful for who she is now. Like, I'm so much better off who I am now, and I just have so much more healthy habits, and I'm just genuinely more happy. And like happiness for me is just such a big thing. Like even if other shit is going on, sorry my language, if there's a if there's other shit going on, then you know it doesn't always, as long as you're kind of like happy in yourself, then yeah, to me that's the biggest thing. That's all that matters. And that's actually one thing that my dad says for us. So yeah.
Oh, I love that so much. I think there's so much value in being able to share your feelings and to be able to talk about things. And I've realized recently, like, that's definitely how I process things. Like, if something's going on in my head, I have to talk it out loud. So, like, journaling does help me sometimes, but then, like, picking up a pen feels like a lot of effort sometimes. So, actually speaking about it, and I come to different conclusions when I'm speaking out loud. I'm like, oh, okay, actually, yeah, it's just how I process things. And I think what is really important as well, our generation, I mean, I think we're not too dissimilar in age. I think I'm a bit older than you, but like our generation we're doing so much work on ourselves, and we are looking to grow and learn lessons from what we've been through. I think it's really nice when we share that with our parents,
Yeah.
because some of the things, like you say, like you talk to your mum about the anxiety and you try and help her see things differently. Some of the conversations that I've had with my mum in the last few years, be it around events that are happening in the world, be it around politics, religion, be it around like the personal growth stuff, being able to have those conversations has helped her see things differently. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we grow up surrounded by the same people, the same mindsets, what they've learned from their parents. And it's, unless we take ourselves away from that, like we've obviously both done a lot of traveling and we're both invested in growing, because of that we're able to change the perspectives and the mindsets of the people around us who
Yeah.
perhaps never would have experienced those different thought patterns because they'd only ever grown up in the same way, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think I wouldn't necessarily say I've done that with my mum. I think it's difficult because I understand from their perspective that, you know, they, mental health to them was never a thing. It didn't exist. You know, it was not, it wasn't even, you can't even say it was a taboo subject because it wasn't even a subject, I don't think. And so for her, obviously I know she's gone, you know, she's gone through what I've gone through in terms of, she knows, you know, she's experienced the worst of my anxiety. But I think her to then fully shift her mindset around this is really hard.
Mm.
But I think, but obviously, like you said, I'm surrounded by, even on the online space, that I follow so many people that relate back to anxiety or have gone through some sort of mental health, you know, whether it's depression or anxiety or some, yeah, anything to do with mental health, that I'm always having those kind of conversations with someone. Whereas, you know, my parents don't really have, or they never really had that. And I think it's also that thing that if they open up about that, that's a weakness, because that's, you know, that's another thing. So I think that's one thing that I wish I kind of would have done, is helped maybe my parents a little more, or not necessarily my dad, but mum specifically. I think if I was able to kind of help her see, you know, that there, it can be so much better than how she was doing, then that would be amazing. But I think it's so hard sometimes to get that through to someone,
Yeah.
especially with how, like you said, how they've grown up, who they've grown up around. You know, when, and I think I would be the same if we didn't have, I mean, I dread to think what I'd be like if we didn't have any of this open conversation around mental health. I have no idea where I'd be, and I don't really want to know. I think it would be quite a dark place. It really, it, yeah, it would have just been horrible. So that's one thing I'll always be forever grateful. You know, people like you, where you're having these conversations, you're creating a podcast around this. Like it's so important, and it can only get better, because I still think that it's not talked about as much as it should be, but so much more compared to, you know, like you said, when we're at school, it just wasn't a thing. And that was like when I talked to my counsellor and she said you have anxiety, I was like, well, doesn't everyone? I was like, no, I think you've got that wrong. But then she went into the explanation. I was like, and she was like, are you doing this? Are you feeling this? Is this? And I was like, damn, yeah. Okay. You know your stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is talked about more than it was, but I think there's still a long way to go. And as I said, like, it's nice that we can have these conversations, because I definitely, the same as you, if I wasn't listening to people talking about this, and if I wasn't being made to feel that it's acceptable and that it's normal, well, I say normal, that's not a very appropriate word, but like, it is common for people to have these feelings. It is common for people to have anxiety around different things. It is more common to have depression now. Like, it's not the case, I mean, I don't know, it could be, it's not the case that it's necessarily risen more, but it's just that people are talking about it more. And I think when you can share openly and honestly, and when you can read stuff online or listen to stuff online from people who feel the same as you, it makes you feel less alone. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that we've all felt alone at some stage, whether it's with a mental health illness, or whether it's just because we're doing something completely different to what our friends or family are doing, or whether our points of view are different, or our religion's different, or whatever. Like, we've all felt alone at some stage. And I think if we can stop people from feeling alone, then we can bring people together more. And I think there's a lot of value in that, because when you don't feel like you're on your own, things don't feel quite as bad as they do when you feel like you're the only one in the world.
Absolutely. It's that sense of community. It's with anything. Even if the people aren't physically there,
Mm.
it's just being, reading things, listening to things. It's just be like, okay, yeah, I'm part of this. This is me they're talking about, or they're talking to. So yeah, and I think that was one of the things with me. Like, I started like looking online, I started reading those articles, and then that kind of, I think that was also, as well as like my counselor and other people in my life, that was a sign that I was like, okay, it's safe to talk about this. So yeah, that was a massive thing. And I think the other person that I didn't mention that was also a massive part was my nan, because she opened up when she knew that what I was going through. She opened up about her childhood, or her adult, like young adulthood, and she actually suffered with depression massively. And I never knew any of this, but as soon as she started talking about it, I was like, wow, she's been so vulnerable right now, that I'm just like, okay, this is where, I can talk to her about anything. And I think it's since that moment I tell her everything, maybe too much, but I tell her almost more than I tell her so much more than I do my parents. um and it's purely because of that. I think that she was there. She gave me that safe space to just talk about anything and release all my feelings. And she does that now, like, whenever I'm having a hard time, she's just like, just call me or come round, and we just talk. We don't have, I'm not on like any devices or anything. We don't have the TV on. We just sit at a table or sit on the sofa and we just talk like for hours. It can be like so many hours, and afterwards I feel like a great, like, it's like I've released loads of stuff that was just, I was just like like covering up, or what's the word, it was just building up inside. And then yeah, it's just a great release. She's part of my therapy, I think, honestly. She's great.
Oh, that's so sweet. I love that. I've got a really close relationship to my grandparents as well. So I'll often, like, if I'm struggling, theirs is like the safe space as well. So I'll go around and I'll just kind of like blurt out how I'm feeling. And it does that, it makes you feel lighter, doesn't it? As soon as
Yeah,
you've shared it, as soon as you've said to someone, and it can be anyone that you feel comfortable with. It could even be like a stranger on the internet, or like the Samaritans, or someone where you can just get your feelings off your chest. And
yeah,
I think as well, like, you don't need someone to fix you sometimes, because sometimes I have to say this to perhaps like my mum if I'm talking about it, or I'll just have to say, like, I don't need fixing, like, I don't need a solution, I don't need to know what to do next from this. I just got to get it off, and as soon
yeah.
as I let it out, that's fine. And then there are occasions where I'm like, this is what I'm struggling with, how am I going to do it? Like, fix me.
It's just someone to listen to. It's just someone you have that will listen to you, and not, yeah, like you said, not necessarily fix you, not even respond, but just be there. That, I mean, this will sound stupid, but I think a lot of people will relate to this. Is I also use dogs to
Yeah.
speak to, like, and that's why I love to go on dog walks, because it's my time to, I won't necessarily, I'll just speak to myself sometimes, but for some reason I think dogs, like, they sometimes understand. They know when you're feeling sad, or when you're feeling lonely, or when you just need a bit of a, a lift up. Like, and I mean, I used to, my nan used to have a lab, and I'd always go out with him. I mean, I swear I gave him depression because of the amount of talks I gave to him. But it was just, and I felt so good after. I would just say to my nan, like, I'm gonna come and take the dog out. I need to unrelease a load of emotions. And I would just talk to him, and he would just look at me like, I'm here. And it's just great. I honestly love dogs so much for that, because they take so much from us humans, honestly.
I know, bless her. I knew as soon as you started that sentence, I was like, I bet she's going to say that she talks to the dog, because I do exactly the same, because it helps
Yeah,
so much. And when you said as well, like, you don't necessarily need someone to respond. This is something that I've been trying to learn to do recently, like as in the last like 6 months. When people come to me and share stuff with me, it's almost like I just sit there and listen, and then I'll be like, would you like me to make a suggestion, or do you just, because I think as well, when it's someone that we care about so much, we want to give, like, we want to jump in and we want to say like, I can support you, or have you tried this, or have you tried that, and we want to provide that solution for the ones that we care about, because that's how we kind of show our affection and our love. But then also, having been on the receiving end of that, I understand that sometimes that isn't isn't helpful. So I think I read about it recently, like having that open conversation, and when someone is sharing, say like, is this a, like, do you want me to help you solve the problem in this conversation, or do you want me to listen? Because then that way, when you're in those situations with friends, family, whoever, you know how to respond best to suit their needs. And I think that creates that safe environment, but then it also enables people to open up even more, because they're like, this person's just going to sit and listen to me.
yeah, yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. So before we go, just to kind of finish, what would be your top 3 tips for someone living with anxiety, or for someone who perhaps thinks they've got anxiety?
So yeah, first thing would be to find help that um suits your personality. So for me, looking back at it, counselling wasn't really helpful actually. I thought like speaking to someone would really be helpful, because obviously like what we've just said, like someone just to listen to you is great. But actually the fact that I didn't know them, I didn't have that initial relationship, I didn't feel as safe as I would say if it was my nan, or if it was the dog, or if it was my parents. Um, so whereas when I found hypnotherapy, obviously I did have, it was different for me because I had that relationship with my neighbor, but I'm so glad that I did go for it, because initially I thought of it and I was like, oh, this is a bit odd. I feel uncomfortable maybe trying this. But that was the thing that stuck and that initially, eventually helped me. So yeah, just trying different things, because, I think the go-to is either go onto a pill, use all the pills that the doctor says, or counselling. I feel like those are the 2 main options that people will give you. But just do research around, because there's so many resources out there now, that there's going to be something for you, like you can get better. Second one would be, there's this is so hard because I know not everyone has this privilege, but just do more of what you love to do. Find what soothes your soul. And that could be, it doesn't have to be like you have to go out and find a new sport that you want to try. It doesn't have to be anything like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be stepping out of your comfort zone, but just something that you're like, okay, yeah, I want to do more of this because this is what I love to do. Don't feel pressured into getting out of that comfort zone, because I know there's so much talk around you have to get out of your comfort zone to get into the next stage of your life. It's absolute bullshit sometimes. Like I completely get it with some things, like the amount of times that I've gotten out of my comfort zone and it's been for the better. But when I was at my worst of anxiety, like there's no way I would get out of my comfort zone. And like when I was at my worst. So just continue doing what you're doing inside of that comfort zone, if that's what kind of is what you love, and that is kind of what is helping you get through each day. Third tip, speak to someone. It's kind of like the first one, but find a community, whether that's with your family, your friends, or if you find a community online. I think do what kind of makes you feel comfortable. Again, stick in with your comfort zone. and just speak up, speak to someone, because there will be someone out there that will listen 100%. Like, that was the most terrifying thing for me. I covered it up for, it was a good year before I told, my sister and my parents, and they had no clue, even though I was like breaking down at school almost daily. And my friends saw all of this, and they didn't really question it because I didn't understand either. So I was like, "Oh, I'm just going through tough times." That's literally what I would say. Um, but as soon as I spoke to, as soon as I spoke to my assistant of the sixth form block, I was like, I felt so much better instantly, even though I wasn't better for a long time. Just that initial conversation, I was like, okay, I can get out of this. Like, there is a way out, there is a way forward, and I do have a brighter future ahead of me. This is going to be the worst of it. Just know that it's going to get better. And again, like, speaking through it as well with someone will improve your mindset massively. So those are my 3 tips.
They're great tips. Thank you so much. And I do really like, my favorite one is like speaking up, speaking to someone. And I think as well, I saw the other day that there's a new therapy thing online where you can text.
Yeah,
Rather than having to think, oh, I've got to speak, because I would not want to call the Samaritans, because I don't like calling anyone. I don't like being on the phone to anyone. So that for me would be a bit of a barrier. Whereas now there's a text thing available where you can just text someone and be like, this is how I'm feeling, and have that communication with someone. And sometimes if you don't know the person, it can be easier for people because you can kind of open up more. But definitely look into that. I'll try and find the details of that and put it in the show notes so that we've got that there, because I think it's so helpful. So as we wrap up, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
So mainly on Instagram, I'm always on there. So my @ is Abigail_Rose_social. Or you can just head over to my website, which is abigailrosewest.co.uk, and I'll be on there.
Amazing. I'll put that in the show notes anyway, so people can go and check it out. It's been so wonderful to have you here. Thanks so much for being here, Abbie.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope your first podcast interview was okay.
Yeah, I can't wait to do more now.
Brilliant, you've got the bug. Okay, thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you in the next one.